G'day, it's Damned here, and we're bringing you another video in this new reboot series. This is going to be a pretty full-on video. We're going to do some pretty cool stuff, and it's hopefully I've done this in a pretty efficient way. But what I want you to really understand about this is that I didn't get to the efficient way the first time. I first built it up slow and old, and then refined it, and hopefully where I've got it now is pretty close to where it's going to be as efficient as possible. So some background. This video series just started as trying to answer some questions that someone who's building a rule set had some specific questions. And so I'm not actually building something that's legitimate, I'm just mucking around. But what they had is a set of skills that require that the skill score is based on a calculation based on a number of attributes. So in our character sheet here, I've added a few extra attributes. So we had strength in here previously. I've added agility, stamina, intelligence, and charm. Right? And so these are my 5 attributes. I've created a new skill box down here at the bottom of the screen because I didn't want to mess with this one just in terms of this experiment. I've created a new skill type called more skills. And I've created a couple of skills in here. So if we open one of these up, we can see that cartography is based on your agility, your intelligence, and your intelligence. And if we have a look at persuasion, everything's opening in strange spots because I just resized the screens for the video. Persuasion uses charm, and intelligence, and riding is a combination of agility, stamina, and strength. Okay, so all of these skills are made up based on a calculation of 3 different attributes. But as you might have noticed from persuasion and cartography, sometimes you'll have the same skill, so it'll be skill 1 plus 2 times skill 2. And the simple way to do that is just to have 3 skill slots. Don't worry about the fact that these don't fit in the boxes. This is not meant to be a finished rule set by any stretch. This is showing how we do some build this and how we build some of these things. So I'm going to let's look at this window here first, the writing window or the skill window, and it's part of more skills. Alright, so I've created a new window. So this is a window and it's called more skills, and we've got a link, we've got a name, and we've got our lock fields. I've also got a description field, and then here we have 3 fields, 1, 2, and 3, and they are ATT, 1 name, ATT for attributes, so attribute 1 name, attribute 2 name, attribute 3 name, and these are string cyclers. And the string cycler, I've got in here the properties. So we've got the label is strength, and it will store a value of lowercase strength, which is the value in our car sheet main. When we go and look at strength, our score over here, we'll notice that it is called strength. So what I'm wanting to do here is match these values here. The value fields will match with the value fields on our character sheet. So this is a string cycler, and it will cycle through strength, agility, stamina, intelligence, and charm. I've got some invisible fields hanging off the right of the page here, and they are used for this one's actually redundant, level, and skill is probably redundant, although it might not be in terms of the calculation. But in terms of this sheet, all of these are not so much needed, but because how to explain this? So when you create the skill, it's not associated with the character, and so I've got to I don't want to have all these empty skill value fields on this skill, because those skill value fields really only matter when it's a part of a character, so when it's on the character sheet. So let's go back into our so what we've got here is on the string cycler, we've got an on value changed set of functions. We're going to dig into these in a minute. So on value changed. On our character, so back here into Fantasy Grounds, if we drag writing into more skills, of course I've got a stack of debug on here because this is just a learning environment. We've got writing and it's auto-calculated our skill score. If we go in here and we look at, okay, we've got our writing is based on our agility, our stamina, and our strength. So there's a few different times when this this score gets updated. So obviously it gets set when I drag the skill onto the character sheet. So let's drag Persuasion on. Different score, it's 21. Let's drag Cartography, and it's got a score of 14. So you see these have been auto-calculated. They can't calculate here when they're in the campaign tool. They can only calculate once they join onto the character sheet because they use the character's attributes. So what we'll look at next is if we open one of these up, if we open up writing, if I was to change writing, and instead of it using agility, we'll just go to the next one, stamina, we can see that this score here changed slightly, went from 22 to 21. Now it's dropped down to 19 and up to 24, but we're going to put it back here to agility. Alright, so 22. So when any of these are changed, the score will be recalculated over here. So it calculates when it's added to the character sheet, it calculates if the attributes are changed. What if we create one here inline on the character sheet? So it's not part of the campaign tool, it's just a part of this particular character. So maybe agility and intelligence and intelligence. You know what? Yeah, so forgery is going to require these particular sets of attributes to when you're doing a forgery, and so we can see that we're going to get a total of 14 here. So probably because intelligence and yeah, intelligence is our lowest score, and we've actually used it twice in this attribute. So, but you can see here that this is calculated correctly when we've created a new one inline on the character sheet also, and it's done it in real time. And it needs to also calculate when our attributes change. So if our intelligence went from 10 to 13, now our forgery skill has increased as well. Some of these other skills like cartography and maybe persuasion have probably changed as well. So that is going to affect everything again in real time. And there's one more, so you can actually, in this imaginary particular skill set, you can actually invest or buy points in that skill set. So even though forgery is important to this character, even though he's got crappy intelligence, he wants to spend some points here, and he wants to, say, add extra points to his specific skill, and it's going to also update over here as well. So there's a math formula in here, and we're going to dive in and have a look at that in a sec. So let's quickly look at, before we look at the code, we'll look at the other window classes that we've created. So this is our detail one for displaying on the character sheet. So this is what we see in the character sheet. We've got a link, we've got the name, we've got the level, and we've got the actual rollable skill field. And then what I've done is these are additional values, the same ones that are on the More Skills tab. They're in here, but again, these are set to invisible. So somewhere over here, invisible true, and you can see they're outside of our frame dimensions, so our window class dimensions. But what we can see is that on here, we've got some code. Okay, actually, I've missed one section of code to update. You can see here there's a bunch of code running here, and but on this one, all right, okay, so I hadn't quite finished cleaning up. So you can see the length of the code. Actually, I have. So you can see here this on value changed replaces this on value changed 1. So I just renamed it to 1 in terms of my, in case I needed to recover it later on. But this was the original code, and it now what we've got here is on value changed, it generates the node skill, node chara, and it sends it to a function. So let's have a look back on more skills. We can see here that when this happens, when the cycler is changed, the same thing happens. We're generating the node skill and node char variables, and we're sending them to this function. There's something extra on this one, and what we're doing is if node skill.getParent exists, and the only time that will exist is when this skill has been dragged onto a character sheet. If it's in the campaign tool, this won't exist, and it's so that it won't try and run this update function, because it can't run the update function because when it's in the campaign tool, there's no character for it to pull the strength and charm and intelligence values out of. So we're doing a if node skill.getParent. If that's true, then we're going to run these extra 2 lines of code. And you can see this is exactly the same code on all 3 of these. Then if we go and have a look at the character sheet itself, we've got basically the same thing. So this code up here was existing. This code here was being used to set the fighting skill, and it's separate to what we're doing just now. But what we've got as well is if strength changes, we need to go through and check every item in our list down here and update the values of anything that uses strength. So we could do it all the way down to that, or we could just tell it to just update everything in there and just pull new values out. So I can think of something else. I've got an error in here. So what I did to create agility, stamina, intelligence, and charm, I copied strength, but I actually don't need this extra stuff here. This is not required for it to recalculate those fields when these values change, because these particular values are not in that formula that I'm just deleting at the moment. But what I'm leaving here is this code, which is going to update the list. So we're going to drill into this in a minute, and what we'll do is we'll go and have a look at the final piece of this puzzle, which is the script. So we've previously looked at our script called manager roles, and this is the one that does the roles for attack and for skill. And what we're going to do is we've created a new one called manager char, manager character sheet, manager character, and this is where a lot of the debug has been generated from. So what happens here is we've created a new function called update more skills, and more skills is just what we've called this one because we already had one called skill, so we've just got one called more skills. And so this function is expecting 2 pieces of data to be sent to it when it's called. It's expecting node skill and node char. Node char is the character sheet, so character sheet.id-0007, and node skill is going to be a character sheet.id-0007 dot more skills list dot and then the ID of that skill. So so they're the 2 pieces of data that get passed to this. Then what happens is, using the skill node, it checks for the names of the 3 attributes. So we might be using strength, agility, agility. So these could be the same. So strength, agility, agility. Then it's looking up from our over here, we're getting the values from the character's attributes. So I'm getting here for skill 1, which is a name. So this is strength. So I'm now doing node char, get child, strength, get value, and I'm using that to set value in ATT1. And then I am, so that is happening 3 times, and then I'm taking, I'm saving this as a variable where I am getting I'm setting a variable number ATT1, which is the value of this command. So strength, if my strength was 32, it's storing 32 in here. If my agility here was 15, it's going to store 15 in this one and this one if I had strength, agility, agility. And N level is just the skill level for that particular skill. And again, it's in the skill rather than the character sheet. And then I am setting the value in the skill to a formula. So my formula is the average of the sum of those three attributes. So what I'm doing is I've got strength score plus agility score divided by 3, and then I'm doing math floor, so I'm rounding that down, and then I'm adding the level. So this is a function that takes the skill node and the character node, and then it does all of these collecting of data, and then it updates the values that are required on the character sheet. So what we have to do whenever we want anything that updates the skills, we're going to get it to use this function. And so to use this function, it's manager car dot update more skills, open bracket, and then we send two pieces of data, the node skill and the node car, close bracket. So let's go and have a look at that in action over here. So we've got on here this particular one. So this is actually our rollable field. And we've got so when this field is initialized, when it is drawn for the very first time, and when its value changes. It is going to, when it's initialized, it runs on value change. When it's first laid out, it runs on value change. And anytime its values change, it then collects the node skill, which is the reference for that specific skill on that character sheet. And then it gets the character's reference or node, and then it sends this data to our function. So there's our script file name, our specific function, and these are the two variables or the two pieces of data that it's sending. So node skill and node car. And on value changed 1 is not used. I just renamed it 1, it never gets called. So I can safely delete that entirely because it's no longer in use. If the level changes, I'm basically going to do the same thing, but it's simpler here. I'm not doing the on first layout or anything else because only one field on here has to really do that. But if this field changes, so on value changed, again I'm going to generate the reference for this skill, and I'm going to generate the reference for this character, and I'm going to send it to our script. If I have a look over in our more skills window, when I look at the cycler, I'm basically doing the same thing. When this value changes, I'm going to generate the ID of this skill. But then I'm going to check if this skill is on a character sheet. And this is my cheat method of doing it. If node skill.getParent is true, then I will generate the reference for the character, and then I will send it to this function. So here's my function. That's the file name, node car or manager car. This is the actual function name, and then these are the two variables. And so that runs on all three of these. And finally, on our character sheet. So for agility, same thing. Okay, this one's actually a little bit more complicated. Maybe it's a lot more complicated, but it's really simple the way this is done now. So what I'm doing, we'll ignore the debug. I am creating a new variable called node inventory, and it is the character sheet, get child, more skills list. Where does this come from? More skills list. Let's go and look at our character sheet. Down here is our skills list, and it's actually the data source. So more skills list. So you've got a full stop in here. That full stop doesn't go into this particular piece of code, but that's really important. The data source is where our data is stored that we're seeking here. So that data source there is where all the skills that are on this character sheet are stored in the database. So, I'm storing that whole list in node inventory, and it stores it with a ID and then a value, ID and a value. So what we do is we do a for loop. So for, now K and V are just names. Now K and V are really commonly used because K stands for key. That's the number of entries. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 skills on the character sheet. There will be 1, 2, 3, 4 index items in there. So for K, and then V is the actual data. So the V will show our actual node, our skills node, and you'll see that in a second. So we've got some debug chat here. Let's have a quick peek at that. Let's clear our chat. Now this particular code we're looking at executes when one of these values changes. So we're going to change agility from 20 to 25. And a whole lot of stuff has run here. What we've got is, and because I typed in a 2 and a 5, it's possibly changed it twice. But we can see here that here the first debug is looking for all the children of this character sheet. And so all the children include strength, fighting skill, attack skill, encumbrance, this bonus field, agility, stamina, intelligence, charm. Then each of these skills and each of these more skills, they all form part of this character sheet. And actually these skills are not. These are actually in the list. So we've got a skill list and we should have a more skill list in there. And what we've got now underneath that is our, let's find them down here somewhere. We should be able to find our skills, and they are, here we go. So here's the one, node skill, database node equals car sheet ID 1, so that's auto. And then more skills list, which is the source for this list. And then, where are we? And then ID number 2. So it's looking at persuasion in that particular one. And there's another one up here, car sheet ID 1, so it's still auto. It's still the same list and it's reference number 4. So another one of these entries in here. So what we can see is that that piece of debug code, or the reference where we are, so the debug here is K and V, and K is the ID, and V is the path for that skill. And let's go and have a look at it in the code. So what happens is, for every one of these pairs, we're going to run the function, our manager car, update more skills, and we're going to send to it V, which is the reference for the skill. And we're going to send to it node car, which is up here somewhere. Why have I not got a node car in there? I don't have a node car in there because probably it was up here and I deleted it. When I deleted this code, I didn't add it back in down here. Let's quickly edit these. We'll add our node car in, and we'll do it on each of these. Okay, let's go back to here. So we're sending through our V, which has been dynamically generated as it's gone through the list. It's the reference for the specific skill in here. So it's going to run the update the skill on the first skill, then the second skill, then the third skill, then the fourth skill, then the fifth skill. When it gets to no more skills, it will stop running because this will stop. So there will be nothing through to here, and it will end this function. So that is pretty much it. So what I started with was just updating one of these screens first. So I just updated it on the character sheet first. Then I updated it on the detail window, the actual window that pops up with the description and everything. And then I realized that I needed to not run this function when it's not on the character sheet. So I worked out how to do that. And then I realized that I needed to also update the list from outside the list. I needed to update the whole list from outside the list when an attribute is changed. Now there is another way to do this, and it's using add handlers. I didn't want to use add handlers. I wanted to do it this specific way, and I don't know which is better or worse. Add handlers are really quite clever, but it creates all these references, and you also have to make sure you clean those references up when you delete items. So for me, at this time, this was the better way to go. So this code here is the trickiest piece of code here on this particular project is this one here. It's nice and simple. It's this one here where we generate a list of all the items in the skill list, and then we use part of that list that's been generated to send it back to the function, and then the function runs the same way. So the real advantage for this is that if my formula is wrong, or my formula has to be tweaked, whatever happens there, I update it one time, and instead of me having to change the code in 9 other places, I only change it in this function, and it's going to reflect back to the whole character sheet. There's a lot to digest in here, but as with the other videos in this series, I'm uploading the RWP, the project file, and the pack file so that you guys can see it, pull it apart in your own time, and work through it nice and slowly. There is a lot to go through in here, but there's some really awesome skills in here that make working with lists so much easier. And of course, if you've got 2 different types of functions or math routines that do this, you can create a second function, and you just have to make sure that there's some logic in your code that tells Fantasy Grounds which function to run. So say maybe these are combat skills, and so they run a combat skill function, and they use a different set of inputs, and you'll have to put a value on this window or this window that stores the fact that this is a combat skill, and then you'll say, if combat skill, use this function, else use that function. So doing this is definitely the way to go as you get better at this. Now, as I said, I didn't get to this the first time. I've probably spent 5 or 6 hours building this up for this video. So I'm not using this myself. This is just a dummy test one, but it probably honestly took me that long. I am not a whiz at this stuff. I just persist at it and push at it and learn step by step, and I just take things and I build them. And sometimes I forget stuff. Actually, I forget stuff all the time if I'm not using something for a little while, because this is not something I do in my job. When I stop coding for a few days in Fantasy Grounds, I tend to forget all sorts of stuff and I have to go and relearn it. But it gets a bit easier each time. But just plug along, build on the skills, just advance a little bit at a time, and just keep learning. There's so many good resources out there, and this tool, the Ruleset Wizard, definitely makes things a lot easier. Definitely does for me. So have fun, and I hope this has been useful to you. Please let me know how you found this video. Thanks.